Hi there, it's Calder here from Singing Matters once again, and today I just wanted to talk to you about some of the things I find myself repeating quite a lot as a coach to my students. The three most common things that I find myself reminding students to look out for. And it's crucial to kind of put it like that as well, because it's up to you to look out for these things yourself and start to self-diagnose things that are going on. The quicker students get to that, the better for them. So what are the main things that I find myself repeating a lot? Well, it's stuff like, there's still a little bit of tension, a little bit of straining happening there. That kind of comment, perhaps raising the larynx, often associated with that tension that I'm talking about. Things like there's possibly a little bit of a push or a squeeze on the breath happening, where you're using too much breath force and breath pressure and kind of forcing it up through the cords, therefore trying to squeeze to compensate for that, or gripping on the cords anyway just as a matter of habit, or letting too much air escape. So I'm talking breath control stuff here. So we're talking strain as one of the main things, still a little bit of strain, perhaps musculature get involved that shouldn't, breath problems that are still apparent, and too much volume. You still could probably benefit from just taking 50% of the power away there. Just take a massive chunk of the oomph out of it. Take the volume away. Those kinds of comments I find myself saying a lot. Now, I think it's important for students to be told this sort of stuff. My job as a coach is to kind of highlight the things that you are doing as a student, as a singer, noticing the stuff that's going on in your body language that tells you a lot about what's happening, noticing the things that you're doing and getting you to get better at spotting that yourself. And what's great when students get a little bit further down the line is they start to be able to recognize these things for themselves. They kind of go, I was doing that. Oh, okay, that was okay, but the one before it was a bit tense or whatever, you know? And you start to get really good at spotting these things for yourself. And I've had a lot of students since I started this channel, which was at the start of the year. It probably takes them longer than they want it to, but they've made some real progress. Still a long way to go for some people, still a long way to go for many. But it's a long old game. It's never quite as easy and quick as we want it to be. But I've had some great progress from students recently. There's a couple of people in particular that have just really... It's night and day what they're doing compared to what they were doing a few weeks back. And sometimes things really click like that. And it's nice to... I've tried to say that sort of thing to people, and when you're struggling, you kind of don't believe it. It's hard to believe. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you can have a breakthrough. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold coming on this week. So just to go back to some of those things I'm talking about, we have to watch out for the strain and tension and extrinsic muscles getting involved in the voice. And even when you think you've made progress or you start to make progress, some of these things can sneak back in, or you just still have a habit where the larynx is getting pulled up in the throat. And we've got to keep a constant watch on what we're doing, a constant eye on what's happening. And I think it's so useful to watch yourself. And even when I try and get people to watch themselves, it's very hard to make them do that. They're kind of in the moment doing what they're doing, and they don't necessarily directly look at themselves on the screen when we're doing video calls, or, you know, perhaps in their own practice, really watch what's happening, film themselves, or watch in the mirror, watching a phone while they're doing it. But you can learn a lot when you get used to seeing what's happening. You start to spot it immediately yourself. You can see that there's this, maybe not as it happens, but certainly a release at the end of singing a line, where you can tell that something was tensing up down here. Something was gripping outside of the voice box, outside of the whole larynx, outside of the... You find your Adam's apple, even for girls as well. Feel your way around that hard cartilage that houses the voice. You can feel it vibrating when you talk. And when you get this sense of like grip, pulling, and things up here, engaging, all these muscles, even under the chin, sometimes in the jaw, stuff happening in the jaw. We want everything to stay nice and relaxed. And often as we raise higher up, this starts to really, something engages there. And I try to tell students all the time, just watch out for that. It just started to grab. You can see things happening. And I used to, perhaps when I was a new coach, not want to, stop people in their tracks so much and not be so demoralizing to constantly point out the things that are wrong. But they just take longer to get there if you do that, if you let them off, if you kind of don't point it out. So I like to stop people and say, look, so what happened there? And then we'll try and create a little bit of the start of a yawn, not necessarily a full-on yawn, but just breathe in as if you're about to yawn. Just open, dilate the throat, just keep everything nice and spacious. Not too much so that you're really lowering the larynx too much, although in practice you want to do that to get used to being able to control the position of the larynx. Oh, you want to do this dopey sound and bring the larynx right down like that. Oh. But then really what we're looking for is somewhere a little bit more subtle than that. It's often a really good idea to go to the extremes to find the control that you need and to find the extreme of something before we rein it back in and look for something that's a little bit more like how we want to naturally sing. But certainly just the start of a yawn just opens up, and then you try singing on that, and suddenly everything feels open and you're not getting that sense of tension, build up as you get higher up. So that's one of the main things that you just got to keep a watch on. And I think the sorts of students that I tend to deal with, because the kinds of videos that I've put out there and the kinds of things that I'm really, really familiar with myself as a singer, having spent years and years shouting and screaming at people sounding absolutely horrible. I've had to work a lot of things out. I've had an operation on my voice. I kind of sometimes scared to mention that. But on the other hand, I've seen a coach or two here and there mention their own struggles, and it gave me a little bit of sort of leeway to think it's okay to admit issues you might have had with your voice yourself. So having gone through a lot of this stuff, these are the sorts of students that I appeal to, I guess. And because of that, I find myself having a lot of students who have a lot of work to do, and it's really hard to undo all these things that are going on and unpick all these things that are going on, and it feels difficult. It feels sometimes like, I'm not getting these people anywhere, will they ever start to fix this? And you start to doubt yourself as a coach, and then all of a sudden they can have this breakthrough, or all of a sudden things start to feel like, hang on, they're really singing this now, So what your job is as a singer when you're trying to learn all this stuff is to really get better at understanding the sensations that you feel, really get better at noticing the things that happen as you sing, and as you sing every single note, every single vowel, every single time you change something in the note or the vowel that you're singing, the word in the phrasing, something could happen that's going to affect the voice, that could cause it strain. Something might happen as an instinct where you push air because you're so used to feeling like you need to push for that note, and you push air out, and you even when you're doing a scale, you can go la 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 la, and you start going at it, start squeezing, pushing, tensing, and you've got to get really good at noticing these things. So those breath problems, again, moving on to the second one I mentioned, they are huge as well. The breath problem is something that you just keep having to come back to. It will always undermine the rest of your technique, no matter what you're trying to fix, if the breath control isn't sorted out. And it often amazes people how little air you actually need, or how singing a more powerful, what seems like a more powerful note requires less air. It's so hard for people to grasp that contradiction. It feels counterintuitive, but it's not. The chords are stretched, they're moving really fast, they can't handle a lot of air being pushed through them. They're trying to come together like this, and if you force loads of air through these chords when they're trying to come together like this, it blasts them open. They can't come together, therefore the note gets breathier, the note gets more going on behind the actual note, and less of a closed, strong, controlled sound will result. So it's really hard for people to grasp that. But the higher up you get, the less air you need, because the chords, they just need to be delicately dealt with as you are stretching them and pulling on them so much like that. So people often aren't aware, they kind of go up and then suddenly this comes through as they push for this note. And I'm constantly saying, what do you feel in the stomach? What do you notice happening there? Is there anything going on there? And I'm always asking my students to try and ask that question to themselves. I think it's much better to get students asking that question, get students to constantly be reviewing what they feel, noticing what they feel at every moment, because it takes a long time to start doing that. It's hard to actually be aware of what you feel when you're singing. And as I've said before, what singing used to feel like to me, it was insane. It was so intense. It was crazy. My head was going to blow off, and getting gradually working out how much of that was wrong, unhealthy, not necessary, to strip it away to this easy feeling that you can get when you sing was quite something. And I look back now and it's so far from what I used to do when I sang on stage for years, terribly. Everyone loved my passion. I'd still get booked. I had a bit of grit in my voice. It was horrendous at the same time. I'm feeling a little bit weak today. Ever since I had that operation, my voice goes through these kinds of ups and downs. I've actually got a little bit of gap in my gigging schedule at the moment. And, it's nice. I'm really enjoying not having to sing. I'm enjoying being able to feel like an artist and get back into my own songs a little bit, and just have a weekend, have a bit of a life outside of having to go and perform for people, because quite honestly, I'm bored to death of my songs that I sing, and I need a whole new set. It's hard keeping it all going, and I really need to change what I'm doing, but my voice feels like it's gone back to that kind of weakened state at the moment. I've got a bit of a cold coming in. But a couple of weeks ago, I did 2 gigs on a Saturday and 1 on a Sunday lunchtime. And I was a little bit apprehensive. I've not done so many of those kinds of schedules recently. I used to do it a lot more a few years ago. I was worried that my voice wouldn't hold out too well and it might be getting weaker and weaker through the day. But actually, I think my voice felt better than ever after I'd done a real workout, a marathon bunch of gigs, 2 kind of an hour and a half, and then as a duo, and then with the band later on that day, 2-hour sets. It's a lot of singing in a day. And then the next day, I kind of got up and went straight out to another gig in the lunchtime and was singing again by 1:30. And, I'd had enough time to sleep, get some breakfast and get to where I was going. It's a lot of work on the voice, but weirdly, it felt better for having sung more, which was great. It felt stronger. It felt thicker. It just felt like that. What's missing at the moment in my voice is the low end, the kind of masculine low end. It kind of goes a little bit weak and wispy when I'm not using it as much. And sometimes it goes weak and wispy after using it. And it's constantly up and down. But this is the journey, you sometimes have to accept as a singer. I've had an extreme situation where I've actually had, an operation on my tiny little precious vocal cords. And it does funny things to me now. Part of the reason I'm so passionate about all this is to try and encourage people to get on top of these things so they don't go down the same road as I went. But of course, the music world is littered with people who've had voice operations, who've had voice problems, who've deteriorated to the point where they might be senior citizens now, but they're still trying to go out on tour. Bon Jovi springs to mind. Other people's voices who unfortunately just aren't what they used to be. And it's a worrying thing because you kind of want to be able to sing forever, don't you? So take heed that if you feel like there's tension in your voice when you sing, there probably is. And if you're not too clued up on it all, if you've got the slightest inkling that you might have some tension or some strain going on, or you might be pushing it too hard or something doesn't feel quite right, you're right. It's definitely true because you don't know how bad it actually is probably, and how much lighter and softer and quieter you can go and still sound amazing. In fact, doing so will make you sound amazing, and it will free your voice up and allow it to float above these high notes instead of be straining up to the ceiling like you're bashing against the ceiling and you're clamping down on it and pulling on your voice so it can't get any higher. If you know what that feels like, I know what it feels like. There's something that you can work on, and there's something that you might want to fix. And that leads me to the last thing, which was, singing too loud. And I've done a video about that before. You're probably still singing too loud. You got to understand what we hear on a record and what we hear in someone's voice doesn't mean they've gone louder. It just sounds louder. It sounds more intense. It sounds harder to do. It sounds like it must be hard work and effort. So you push harder. But that's the wrong thing. It's the complete opposite of what you need to do. And I often find myself saying to people, just as you get higher, take away the volume, take away the volume, take away the volume even more. As we go from low, you can push the low notes a bit more because the chords are thick, squashed. They can handle a bit more air pressure. They kind of need more air pressure down there, air support. And then as you get higher, you go up to the middle of your range, back off. Hugely back off. Then you get even higher, back off again, massively. Really back off the power and the volume and the push that is happening. And try and notice that what you do to go for a note is push for it. And you need to do the absolute opposite and take all that volume out of it. And suddenly you realise that the voice can work in a much easier way. But it's hard to do it. People struggle to use their voice quietly in the high range. I know exactly what this feels like. There was no way I could get a note out of myself. Like it wouldn't work if I tried to go quiet. And I heard many, many people say over the years, coaches and things I'd read, whatever, here, there and everywhere, one of the greatest skills as a singer is to be able to sing high quietly. And I knew I was one of those people who could only do it loud. And I would say to someone, no, but I can't make it I can't get a sound out unless I blast it. And now I have people saying that to me as a coach. And I'm like, I know. I remember. I've been there. But it's still true, and you have to take that advice. You really have to try and take that advice. If there are coaches, people talking about singing who mention the same sorts of things all the time, maybe in different wording, different ways of putting it, there's got to be a reason why. There's got to be a reason why lots of people say the same thing. And lots of people do say that one. You've got to go quieter. Try and master the art of singing quieter. It's a weird thing with the voice because it kind of doesn't work unless you do what you've always done. You kind of train it to work how it's got used to working, and then doing anything else just really is hard to get a result out of. But that's why you've got to try and have faith in the idea of singing quieter and just gradually work it out. People often have this moment where they do it and they go, I don't know how I did it. And they go back to their old habits. But like I say, those are some of the common things I find myself telling students. Please, if those things sound like they make sense, talk to me. I can help you out. I'm just launching a Patreon at the moment. I've been talking about doing this for a year almost, and I'm really slow at getting these things off the ground. Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe it's a self-sabotage thing. But I need to make a living, and I think people appreciate the way I have taught so far in the fact that I just sort of try and give as much information as possible and help people, and that's certainly what I am like as a teacher, as a person. But my Patreon page is a way of getting people to get some feedback from their practice, feedback from how they are going with their voice, whether you're having lessons with me or not. I'm doing this Patreon idea where you can basically send me a video clip or an audio clip. Video's better. Showing me what you're doing, letting me hear what you're doing, and I will send feedback to you, give you a few tips, point out some of the stuff I can see, point out some of the stuff I can hear, offer you some exercises, and just basically help you along the way, either in between the lessons that you already have or as a separate thing. It's dirt cheap. It's so cheap. My lessons are cheap anyway, but it's about half the price of a single 60-minute lesson on a monthly basis. And I'm not going to be tight. You can send as many videos as you want, as many clips as you want, ask me as many questions as you want. I will then post videos that relate to the things people are asking me about. I've got a bunch of content to add on there as a freebie is what you get as well. So I'm offering my whole songwriting course. I've got a whole lyric course I wrote during COVID, which I've not used. It's just been sat there. It's all about how to brainstorm lyrics and smash writer's block. So you get that as part of it if that interests you. You get my new Breathe It or Fake It or Breathe It course, which is all about breathing and breath work with a load of exercises and warm-ups around the breath. And I'm just going to keep adding content to this Patreon page. So I'm going to put that in the link in the description on this video, and that'll be there for anyone who wants to get a little bit of one-to-one feedback. There's a cheaper option where you can chat to me without the sort of video clip feedback thing, but I can still answer your questions on a cheaper level as well. It's not going to cost very much. But if you're interested in that, obviously get in touch. And I'm not one for selling myself or selling. I'd rather do this in an authentic way. But you've got to also offer these things out. So there it is. That's something I'm doing. And you can find my lessons on singingmatters.co.uk as well. So that was it. It was just a quick one today about the kinds of things that I find myself repeating a lot. There's still a bit of strain. There's still something gripping here and some extrinsic muscles getting involved. We've got to watch out for what we see happening here as you sing and as you stop singing. And then try to watch yourself. Really try to watch yourself. And then you're looking out for breath problems. Is there a pull inwards here? Is there a squeezing happening here? Can you hear behind the note a grip? Can you hear like, I've been, where there's, that feels horrible. Can you hear the kind of breath in the tone? I really didn't enjoy doing that. Can you hear the breath in the note? Can you hear that squeeze? Can you feel something pushing air out at the start or during the note? And then, how loud are you going in those higher notes there? Could you pull back 50% of that volume? Really take the power out of it. Just try and hit the note quiet. Your voice wants you to do that. If you want to get freedom in your singing, try to take that one on board. All of these things will help each other as well. All of these things will just slot into place bit by bit and start to make your voice feel just so much easier to use. And yeah, try to trust that is what you're looking for. It's sometimes hard to believe because it sounds quieter, it sounds less this, less that. But try and trust it. And if you see other coaches talking about similar things, as I said before, there's got to be a reason for that. So that's it today. Just a bit of a discussion. I'm not going to do any exercise or any real singing today. Just a bit of a discussion. I've struggled to keep the videos coming. I'm just spinning so many plates, trying to make a living, feed the kids and everything. And if you want to support what you've enjoyed on my videos so far, like I say, head over to my Patreon and buy me a beer once a month. That would be much appreciated. It will probably go towards the bills and feeding the kids, obviously, as well. No, I can have a beer, can't I? Yeah, and apart from that, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the best of luck with your singing. I know how frustrating it is, and I can tell from the comments sometimes. A lot of people out there are trying to work this stuff out. I hope I can help. I hope this helps, and I will see you very soon on the next video. Thanks very much.